Hey, Philip, how's it going?
Hey, Peter. It's going good. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's honestly kind of cold here, like way colder than I want it to be.
Mm,
Like I think it's the same temp as Denver, but it feels colder here. I don't know why, but it just feels colder here.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
Hey
hello,
Peter. Hi
Santosh.
Philip. Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
Santosh.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you. Is that a CMX jacket, like the community club?
No, this is my team that was my previous team in Cisco. So we had our jacket there.
Ah, okay. So
So
Cisco, what's the MX?
it used to be, man, it's been so long, I forgot what it is.
That's funny. Just like
God,
it's an antique at this point.
it's an antique at this point. Yes, I've been wearing this a lot. All right.
Cool. So
Right
Yeah.
now I am in a, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so if you're not at Cisco, where are you at?
I'm in a startup. It's called Prosimo. We have been using OPA for a very, very long time. 4 years ago, I think, when it wasn't fully adopted. And then, like, I think one of our founders was looking at this, and then he had also gone and met you guys. So now we are like full-fledged into it. So it's been pretty good. I've been kind of looking at that too, to kind of do a couple of other things that I need to do, not just
Nice,
policy evaluation, but other things. So
nice. And when you say full-fledged, can you kind of define what that means? Are you guys
oh yeah, yeah.
out into production? Are you guys in multi microservices, or like what does that mean for you
So
specifically?
we do both. Like basically we have something like, so we have it in production for like for evaluating all the policies when like the access is happening. So we are doing that, but now we are also doing it in such a way that we have some centralized policy that we want to evaluate and something which is more distributed. So we distribute the policies over to like some of our edges, and then that's where again, so that it kind of like the speed kind of increases in a way, because we have like edge evaluations that are happening, and then some of them which are not time critical, they are kind of evaluated in the central server as such.
Gotcha. Yeah. And Phil, that's something actually like maybe it'd be good to talk to Charlie about. Like we should write something which is like OPA at the edge. I feel like we don't have a lot of content there, you know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
That
no.
that could be interesting to cover. Yeah, because
Mhm.
the
Oh,
the
okay.
ways that you structure your policies may be a little different depending on what you're trying to do with them. And it
Yeah, yeah.
sounds like it sounds like your group, um, how do you pronounce your name? Santosh? Santosh?
Yes, Santosh.
Santosh?
Right.
Sounds like y'all have kind of already been experimenting in that area of like how do we do our policies differently depending on whether it's at the edge or not.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, totally. And both of you
yeah,
are from Styra, or like,
Yes.
oh,
yeah,
okay, okay. No, no, this has been very cool. Like, the way you guys have kind of structured this and made it open source, it's been very helpful for us, for sure. And then also what I mean, just to give you like a flavor, because you guys have worked on this for so long, and just to let you know how we are kind of modifying now, like we actually modified some of the source code to kind of do some of the functions that we wanted it to do. But it was more in terms of like just like some APIs or something like that. It wasn't like more in terms of functionality, but that's not done by me, so I'm not sure what exactly we've done. But there's some custom code that we had to write, just to get a different kind of inputs, I think. But
Nice.
that's something done by somebody else. What I'm doing now is like I'm moving beyond policy, and I wanted to kind of like implement route tables and things like those in OPA. So like in terms of like how when you kind of have routing, what you do is basically you want to kind of get matched to um the smallest cider as such. Like you're
right.
kind of doing like a smallest cider match, and then you're trying to get the next hop and things like those. So what we are trying to do is kind of build this path, like a trace route path, because we have route tables for each one of those. And then I'm using OPA to do that. And the reason to do that was basically we have a centralized OPA that is already deployed, So we are kind of running a separate policy engine, like separate policy in that with a separate route. And then basically from there, we are kind of just evaluating like all these routes and other things out there. So it's been very helpful. Along with the routes, we are also deploying like some config policy checks and things like those. So it was very nice to kind of see how this kind of worked out for us, and also like the speed and other things and scalability, which we had already tested. So it was like using the old tool to go beyond policy, at least in our product. I know people use it anyways outside us to do all of these other things, but it was nice for us to do it too.
Nice. And can I ask what gave you guys an edge to use OPA versus like routing tools within your firewall, or I don't know if that's Cisco or if that's something else, but like what gave you that edge to use OPA versus like the built-in routing?
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
like what?
so-
Why not PF or something?
Yeah.
Right.
No.
So what we are doing is we are not actually using OPA for a real-time route evaluation. We are using OPA to build routes based on the config. So so that's where, like, you know, if I was actually going to and doing this thing in a proper router, I probably wouldn't have used OPA, because again, you know, there are much better tools and written in C and other things that are already available. And Linux has like some of these great routing tables and other things that they can do. But this one was a little bit different. And then we wanted to evaluate in a central place. And the cool part about that was what we didn't want to evaluate the routes, but also the policies that are going along with each hop. So then already we were going to use OPA for that. We are already using OPA for production. So it was just it was seamless to kind of use a one tool for evaluating everything. And this wasn't like a very, it is not a very time constrained real-time thing. It's more like ease of use, because we already know, at least we had the expertise to write Rego. And so, I mean, basically we kind of just picked it up and then wrote a little bit more.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for giving us a little bit of background of how you guys are using OPA. And so yeah, so why don't you let us know how we can help you? What are you guys working
Oh, okay.
on that we
So
can-
I had a couple of questions. So like this is again regarding some policies people have been using long time ago. For OPA, for mainly OPA for, which is basically like, you know, policy evaluation. Now I had a question. I actually wanted to see, when somebody applies a policy, is there a way that I can detect if the policy is going to be shadowed?
by shadow, do you mean like?
So basically, let's say I'll give you an example. Let's say there's an allow policy for everybody who's accessing from United States.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's a very simple policy. It's like allow, like, you know, if the user location is United States. Now, if there is a policy which says deny if user is from California. Now, what is happening is like the California is a part of US, right? In some sense. Now, I'm just giving you an example where, like, you know, imagine that you already have a dictionary or something built out where you know that California is a part of US and things like those are already in place. But if certain policy like this is happening, clearly the second policy is kind of being shadowed by the first policy, like in the sense that it's a subset of the first policy. So I'm kind of thinking about this in terms of like, if you think about set operations, if I want to forget about the actions that are going to happen based on this, but if a policy is a subset of another policy, you have a lot of if conditions, right, in this, but can we detect that from OPA?
So the way that I've seen this done is you have to decide whether you want to fail closed or fail open. And then that determines how you have to structure your rules, so that basically what you would be looking for, from what I can tell, is you would prefer the fail closed style, where if there's any denies, the whole thing is denied, right?
Right.
So what you would end up needing to do is check and see if allow and no denies, then, you know, we allow this through. So you would have a global, like, top level rule that has to do that check for the and no denies part. And then you would have a bunch of sub rules for the sub allows. The problem is the shadowing problem you're talking about is something that is not solved in the language itself. You have to structure your policy in order to take that into account, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so see, the thing is like, we have the policy such that we've already made the policy such that if it is denied in California, then it will be denied. Like we
Okay.
know that we've
Okay.
made that out. Now, my question actually was like, basically, before the user goes and says, let me add this policy where, if he's in California, then deny. Before he adds that, I wanted to give a warning saying that, by the way, you already have a policy which says if he's in US, it is allowed. And this policy is going to be a subset of that. It's not more about like evaluating the
Ah,
policies, all of these policies together, because that we got it. But the problem is like, if you have competing policies, can I give a warning to the user saying that, hey, this policy is going to be in conflict with the other in some sense, like you're using the same parameters or something around that. So is there, it's not more about evaluating the policies with different policies. It's more like saying that, is these policies going to clash, or while evaluating, in the sense like, things like
Hmm.
those.
Yeah, that is a good one. And I think it's hard to understand, like, this, at least from a, like, knowing where that California set and that, US set are coming from, right? Like, if the California set was literally just a subset of the California, where you could say, oh, if nothing is coming from California or from US.California, then you might be able to do something like that. But if there are two completely different referenceable sets, it's hard to know that one is coming from the other unless you wrote an additional check that said, check if this set is from this other set. But then you end up adding a lot more logic that
Yeah.
The thing I was going to suggest would also involve adding a lot more logic. So
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah,
Is there like, so I was looking at like, how you have this intermediate results set as such. Is there something we can do, like, if the policies, like if you have a lot of policies together, are they compiled in such a way that it is like a combination of all these policies? And then I can go and check whether this policy falls in one of those branches or things like those.
if you're
Like
thinking
it's,
of the IR format, then no, that's a
no,
different
okay,
animal.
I see.
It doesn't quite work like that. It's closer to like assembly language that it is
Oh,
to,
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's meant to
suspected
be,
that.
yeah, it's meant to be like the format you would feed into a compiler for something else.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, you
Is
could
there?
use it for analysis, but I don't think it would be easy to get the kind of results you're looking for out of it. I mean, you're
Got it.
welcome to try, but I've dealt with it once or twice, and it'd be like reading assembly language to try to figure out what the source functions are doing, you know?
Right. No.
So
I don't think
yeah.
I'll get a chance there.
The thing I was going to suggest was if time is not a huge constraint for you,
Mhm.
one option is you could feed your inputs to, or like if you're getting, I guess it depends on how your policies are structured, but if you have your allow and deny rules all in the same, overall
Yes.
policy blob,
Yes.
you could evaluate the whole document and see if any allows trigger, and you get those in your results. You could actually look at, oh, look, these allows triggered, and you would also be able to see, oh, these denies triggered, and be able to see that there's a conflict. Another option would be having all of the allow rules tag like onto a like, yeah, I guess you could call it a provenance or like, who allowed it, object or set. But every one of the allow rules that triggers could potentially tag like, hey, I'm the one allowing this. Like the California rule,
Oh,
might
yeah.
tag like, I'm
Yeah.
denying because California, and your US rule could say allow because United States.
Right.
And then at the end, you would just check and see if all of those rules got to be evaluated, what are the results in those final allow and deny reason sets?
Yeah.
This conversation actually came up in the issue tracker a really long time ago, before I joined Styra, actually. And I looked back because people have wanted the ability to know, like, why was a policy denied for like a while? And
Yeah.
so this was like a coding style thing that they came up with as a way to do that, is you have your rules annotate when they trigger.
Got it.
And so
So
that might get you halfway there.
Yeah, so we do have the annotation. Like basically we do get back saying that, okay, this policy or this access was denied because of policy X that you have deployed, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then,
Okay.
but the policy itself is a combination of multiple conditions, right? So now we want to figure out like from those, like, or which combination is that happening, or something around that, which will go and say, like if the policies are clashing in a way. So now I'm kind of going into the and conditions of the policy itself, which is kind of, I hope I'm getting my terminologies right, because I've been on this only for 2 months now. But but basically what I'm saying is, like, I think like the rules are like combinations of policies. Is that how you say? Or like, or what are the conditions within each policy?
I would call those expressions, or like
Okay, so
individual
yeah, okay.
conditions or checks
And then
types of
these are the
things would
rules,
be.
and the policy is a combination of rules, right?
So
That,
whenever you write something at the start of the line and it has curly braces following it, that's a
yes.
rule. And we would
Okay, all
refer
right.
to the name of the like curly brace enclosed thing. We would call that a rule head, because that's how you
Okay.
would refer to the, like when that thing will appear in the result document, like it'll appear under that name, right?
Right.
So yeah, a rule, at least in the terms OPA thinks about it, is, yeah, it's that name plus everything that follows it inside the curly braces.
Got it. Got it. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So basically we have this rule, and then there's different expressions, like, we wanted to compare one rule against the other rules across these expressions, like if the expressions are clashing in a way. So anyway, so that's I'll try to figure out if we can do those in some sense, but I don't know how. It's more like, in California and US is one example, but there is integer operations, like integer expressions also, which we evaluate in the rule, basically kind of saying that allow if like let's say the score is less than 100, but it will be like deny if score is less than 20. So like, basically what you're actually trying to do in this is like, you're trying to evaluate these two rules, and then these two rules are going to eventually give you allow only if like the rule is between 100 and 20,
Yeah.
rather than kind of, but it's an aggregation of these two rules. Now the way I understand OPA works is like it will evaluate one, it will evaluate the other, and it will clearly figure out, okay, there is a deny here. And then we, as our, the way we have written the rules, we'll say deny has a preference. So we are going to say it is denied because of this rule, that kind of thing. What I really wanted was like, can I go and say, by the way, because of these two rules, the aggregate rule actually turns out to be a single rule, which is basically, it's only 100 to 20 is allowed, that kind of thing. But
yeah,
anyways.
And like those things are possible, right? But that all just comes down to how it's structured. And so at the top level, we have what's called a package, right? And the package is full of rules. And so it's not any one rule that is the outcome, right? Each one of these rules are evaluated, and then you could have congregate rules that then look at the values of each of the sub rules. So if you didn't want to evaluate all of those rules and then have one rule at the top that says, hey, look at all of the evaluated rules and tally them up, and then create an output based on the tally, you could do that, right? Like that's just a structuring problem.
Right, right.
For lower level, like deeper analysis of like this expression in this rule means that this other rule will never be allowed. Like that sort of thing is theoretically possible, but that's getting into like SMT solver territory where you ask, the program to essentially do like logic solving for these things, they clash.
Yeah.
We currently do not have support for that. It would be cool as heck if we did, but we currently don't have that in OPA. OPA at runtime will figure out that like one rule is going to work and the other won't, but it currently does not have the ability at compile time to know that you've written two mutually exclusive rules or two rules that'll feed into each other.
And runtime, how does it know during runtime that this is going to happen? Like, so it shouldn't even evaluate the second one.
I guess saying that it knows is a wrong way to look at it. It's more like at runtime, the runtime is just following. So at runtime, the interpreter for your policy is following just a very simple set of steps to try and fill in the holes in the policy for where your data goes. And when it does that, it will generally, like the first thing that succeeds, it'll say, cool, we have a rule that matches, and
All right.
it'll return that, right?
I see.
And so what'll happen is, first thing that succeeds, that's what OPA is going to give back.
I see.
If nothing succeeds, like it'll go through all the rules that are a match for what you queried, and if none of them succeed, then it returns, a negative result.
Got
But
it.
yeah, it's so when I say like it knows, like that was the wrong choice of word there. It's more like it will find out by brute force, trial and error, what the right choice is. The only like performance thing that might affect that is occasionally there are some rules where you're checking for like a constant, like say a suffix on a string or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes the indexer is smart enough to be able to figure that out and go, oh, we can, get rid of an entire whole like bunch of rules all at once. We just check the suffixes on the string coming in,
Got it.
and so then OPA can very quickly figure out whether it's an allow or a deny on a particular rule.
And you're talking about early exit there, right, Philip?
Yeah. Early exit
Okay.
is usually the one. Like the
I
indexer helps pick the right rule to start evaluating and also allows us to bail out early because it'll figure out like, oh, this rule could never succeed. This one condition that's easy to check for failed,
Got it.
things like that. Yeah.
Is there a way to kind of visualize this map of policies? Like, there are like different rules, and like, all of these rules are working towards like, I guess like the same policy in some sense, right? So is there like, there's going to be this allow, there is also this allow in another package or whatever, same package, but different, so these are like OR policies kind of thing happening.
I personally am not aware of such a tool. Do you know of any, Peter? There might be something in the community.
Right, that's actually fascinating. Like thinking about Terraform, they have a document builder like option where you can output the Terraform plan so that you can build it into a visual graph.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool for OPA as well. Yeah, I personally have not seen it, but I can definitely see the merit in having a tool like that.
Right. So that's yeah, so that was the other thing that I was trying to build. Like basically, one is like to try to show this is what you have, and then the second is to show that, like, by the way, what you're adding is going to be overlapping because of this. Because the users, like our users, are not going to be, they're kind of guided by the UI, right? Like clearly nobody kind of codes in reg with a policy. We do it, but they just have this UI. So now we want to show from the UI that this is what you have. Now you're going to keep adding to this, and here is why the problem is happening. So trying to see, at least if the visualization was there, we could kind of probably try and overlap something.
I think what you're asking for is technically possible. We just don't happen to have anything in OPA right now to generate simple visuals like that.
Yeah, okay. And I also don't know that, right, like to OPA, like if you're referencing the California data set or the San Francisco data set, right, those are individual data sets to OPA. Like it wouldn't necessarily know that one data set is a subset.
Yeah, no,
I
think, yeah, I was thinking of like, basically when I was doing this problem for this company too, my thoughts are more in terms of like, I need to build something custom because we know our dictionary and what is our, sample space as such for each of these variables. And we have like 20 or so something that we want to code on. But then when I was trying to think about like, if I could probably open source that later on, if we build something and then, to help the community, the problem becomes like way harder because now you don't really know what people are matching on. Like, they could be matching on URLs, they could be matching on some strings, they could be matching on many other stuff, which you don't have a sample set on. So it comes like, the universe is much bigger than my world. So my world is like, okay, I know everything around here, but the others becomes a little harder.
So my suggestion to you then would be figure out a solution that works for your problem. I mean, if it's as simple as like having, funny metadata comments or something next to each of your data sets that makes it easy for your tools to go in and figure stuff out. If that's what it takes, then go ahead and do that. And then worry later about whether or not open sourcing it is worthwhile, and if it's a restricted case where it's like, if your problem looks like a network routing problem, this might be
Yeah.
nice for you. Don't worry about trying to solve everyone's problems. Worry about solving like a particular set of problems really well. And then,
Yeah.
if someone in the community wants to, go out and burn a weekend doing the bigger version, then you don't have to burn the time on it. And you still have provided something really useful for people to work with and get ideas
No, sure
from.
thing. No, good
Yeah.
point. It's like I wasn't thinking of like open sourcing right away. I was thinking like if somebody would have done this, why would they do it? And like, could they have done it? And then basically, then I was thinking maybe they can't do it because of all of these things, and that's why it's harder to do it. And then, so
Right.
anyways.
Honestly, it sounds like if you're doing like networking related problems, you may have a constrained enough universe to get something actually really useful. How exactly you hack it, again, up to you, and it'll probably depend on your exact like set of tools, experience, and problems.
So we are kind of looking at in terms of like access and like how do access is granted. So basically this is based on like geo. So we have like countries and cities and everything. So we have built up a map around that, like continent, country, city, that kind of level, state, city. And then basically when the access comes in, we can kind of look at it. There are other attributes which we kind of pull from many other sources like risk scores, and we also pull in other pieces in terms of is the admin allowing this policy or not? So there is a custom policy that somebody can go and say, from this geo, do not allow access to this app at a certain time. And there are these different dimensions that we can kind of go through and then figure that one out. So if I kind of look at this, I have like around 20 dimensions that or features as such that we have to look at. Each feature will probably have some of them are very well-defined spaces, like for example, country and things, right? Like, so I know it is a lot. We in fact work on this so much that it's like around 306 regions that we kind of look into, and then each one of them is subdivided into a lot more. So we, even though it is like 1,000 or maybe even like 10,000, we still know those 10,000 values. Like, so they're discrete values. There are other cases where things are not that clear cut. Like for example, URL, right? They would kind of go and say, do not allow anybody to access a JPEG. So I'm like, okay, so everything JPEG, right? And then that becomes a little bit more freeform. And that's where like, figuring out if the expression is matching the other expression becomes very hard. Otherwise, it is not that hard. Like basically, if I kind of go and say, is this expression, which is talking about location, a subset of this other expression, which is also talking about expression, that's not hard. But the hard part comes in when you kind of have like some kind of a string match or something which is a little bit unknown. And then it becomes very hard to kind of figure out because the space is unlimited. For example, if the name starts with S and ends with T, so it can be, you don't know if it is a match or not, because it could be, there can be names like those, but they could not be also because there are names that are not. So there is like, depends upon what data you're looking at. So the data component of this, which you guys have, may define if this policy matches or not matches, that kind of thing. And that's where the whole problem comes in.
And are you trying to, is the problem here an optimization problem, or is the problem more so just on the authoring side, you don't want to duplicate work?
I think it's more about like user visibility problems. It's like from the software side, we are probably fine. We can probably keep loading up as much, but the users, when they kind of start defining policies, right? Like again, it's from my previous work in Cisco. Like when people kind of go and add these policies, like ACLs, like which we have, right? The network access control list or something like that, which is there on firewalls and other places. Many times what happens is like, I've added this now, 2 years later, I leave the company, somebody else picks it up, or I leave the group. Then they are kind of adding on top of it. And after 4 years or so, nobody knows what they should touch because nobody wants to touch it. If you miss one or if you modified one, everything breaks and you don't know why it has broken. So then it is like, okay, I now started with like 10 rules. Now I am at 1,000. And now what should I do with this 1,000? Like, how do I clean it up? I have no way to clean it up. And that's the problem that we end up facing most of the times. And this is like, we are still, I would say, a startup, so we don't face the problem. But I was just thinking like, when I build stuff, I don't want to build something which will, I want to build to last, that kind of thing.
I would strongly suggest that if you guys are like generating policies where, defined like expressions are going in for certain things in your UI, it
Right.
might be worth tagging those things with comments or something that makes it really easy to parse later.
Okay.
You could build like a visualization around that if you have a way to link like the expression here matches to this thing logically for us. And then you can make it easier, at least for your users, to see like, oh, these rules have a bunch of string matching in them. These ones have
Right.
region matching. And,
Right.
for the problems that you can solve, you would then be able to see like, oh, these are mutually exclusive region things, right? This is going to break. For the string matching, yeah,
I
like
know.
it's a big enough problem you might not be able to solve that.
Exactly.
But yeah, that would be that's kind of like the first like pressure release valve I would reach for, is like, if there's a way to cut down the problem to something smaller and less general case, that often can get you a solution a lot faster, or at least something hackable
Yeah.
in the meantime. Yeah. It sounds like y'all are doing something pretty wild. So best of luck on that. And yeah,
No, sure thing. Thank you very much.
drop into future office hours if you have more questions.
All right. No, sure
Yeah.
thing. I might. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for joining, Santosh. All
All
right.
right.
Talk to you later. Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.